Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our members of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position, along with your favorite beverage, to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine our show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion today, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience at SmithWeekly, including Jim S., Mike P., Jared W., Paul M., and Ryan S. Joining us on the discussions program today is Mr. Mike Collins, Chief Executive Officer, and Mr. Bill Sheriff, the Chairman of Nuclear Fuels Incorporated. Nuclear Fuels is a private company focused on uranium exploration in Labrador, Canada, with its Lab Rare Earths project and uranium as well, and also in the United States with respect to Wyoming and its Kaycee project, Boot Heel, and also Arizona as well. Nuclear Fuels is a uranium portfolio holding at SmithWeekly Research. Nuclear Fuels is a private company that has the goal of listing on a major Canadian exchange in the future. You can learn more about the company via its website, nuclearfuels.energy. Mike and Bill, thank you for coming on the show.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for having us on today.
Yes, thank you.
Well, guys, we've got a good amount to talk about, but why don't we just kick this off here with just shining the light over at Mike a bit here. And Mike, why don't you just cover off your background in the natural resource sector, including your past experience in the uranium sector dating back to the last cycle. Mike, take it away.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm a geologist by background. I started in the public market side of the business in 2005 with a company called Blue Rock Resources. We quickly became focused in conventional resource development in Colorado and Utah. As we progressed along, we realized that the people who won in conventional uranium development and operations in the US were the people who either owned mills or people who had access to mills. So we started our mill permitting process, but knew that was going to be 10 years. So we actually came up with a very unique method of pushing the company forward and managed to get a toll milling agreement with Denison at the White Mesa mill. We were actually the only new conventional uranium producer back in the 2009 uranium cycle. So it was a pretty exciting time. It was a great way to learn about the uranium space in the US. And one of the things that came out of that was an understanding that ISR was probably a much better way to go. Since then, I've run a number of gold exploration companies, as well as spending 5 years running an engineering office here in Vancouver.
Very well, Mike, and I appreciate that. And just establishing as well that you've been around in the last cycle, you know uranium, you know the U.S., which, as you stated correctly, it is a very complex jurisdiction for everything, but also specifically conventional and some of the bottlenecks that we've witnessed there. Over to Bill for a moment. Bill, you've known Mike for quite a while. Talk about your relationship with him and how you guys really concepted this nuclear fuels.
Well, I have. Of course, primary duty is with Encore Energy as executive chairman there, and looking at some of our non-core exploration assets. Typically, we've vended those off to other firms and don't really have a lot of involvement other than a passive shareholder. This particular package of projects was really all came out of Encore and exceptional opportunities that we thought merited a little different handling. And so first story is I looked and thought that they'd make a great asset base for up and coming exploration company if you could just figure out where to get the right people to run it. That led me right to Mike. I've tried to recruit Mike as a CEO on a couple of different ventures over the years and have a lot of time and respect for Mike and his accomplishments and the way he runs things professionally. And so I was able to coerce him into coming on board on this one. And I think he shares the view of the opportunities presented both in Labrador and as well as some of the projects in the States as well. That kind of brings us full center to where we are. And I think it's going to be a compelling opportunity.
Very well, Bill. I appreciate that. And let's move over to the broad market here for a moment. Then I'd like to get into specifically, let's kick things off with this Labrador project, which will be one of the core focuses of the company. But Mike, just come back here because you've been in this sector for quite a while, or you've watched it over the years here during the bear market. But I'd like your thoughts on uranium at this point in 2023. How do you look at this sector today versus how you looked at it back during, say, the last cycle?
Yeah, I think there's a much better underpinning basic structure for the development of demand on this cycle. We've got a clear sense from the environmental side of the world and the media as well that nuclear energy is going to be part of the base load for green energy going forward. That's really quite critical. The other aspect that I think speaks well to what we're doing is the development of small nuclear reactors. It's the Henry Ford moment of the nuclear business, as it were, where we're going from nuclear reactors being expensive and rare to having a clear price tag, clear timeline for development and installation, and becoming more commonplace and just part of how people do business and power things. It really is an exceptional moment for uranium. Beyond that, looking at the government side of things, they're also very interested in pushing forward in development both in Canada and the US.
There's a lot of underwriting happening here. And as you guys know, us as well, we've been in the cycle for a long period here, going back to, for SmithWeekly anyway, 2016 on the research front. Incredible amount of underwriting here. The tailwinds of good news just keep coming, and I expect it'll keep coming for some time ahead of us. Bill, how do you look at the market this year?
I'm often asked what inning I think the uranium market's in terms of the game. And a lot of references made to the 2004 to 2008 timeframe, which was really the only thing that most investors can remember in terms of a buoyant uranium market. Because you have to go back quite a ways before that. There was a blip in '86, and then pretty much nothing between then and 3 Mile Island in '79. I actually don't think the game started yet. There's been a lot of noise about it. Sprout obviously has come in and soaked up a lot of supply on the spot side. But in terms of the actual customers, and you got to remember contracts are 95, 98% of this business. The spot market's such a small percentage. It gets an undue but exciting amount of coverage. But I really don't think that you've seen the game start yet. We're still in warm-ups. So I think the whole game's ahead of us. And I think it's, the most, I've been saying for over a decade on your program and several others, it's the most compelling, undeniable supply demand imbalance that I've ever seen in markets. The only question is when. And I think now we've got the answer to that. When is now? We're on the precipice of what I think is an unparalleled bull market for the next decade or longer.
Bill, I appreciate your thoughts on that. Mike, why don't we move back to you here for a moment? Why don't you give the audience just a brief overview of nuclear fuels? And I'd like to couple that with the focus at the primary project, Labrador, Canada.
Thanks, Andrew. So yeah, our key project is Labrador Critical Metals. We're down in southeastern Labrador in the same shear hosted zone as Search Metals, which has done sort of quite a robust PEA level REE study. We see the potential there for high grade uranium discovery. We've got grades there of up to I think 6.7% in grab samples of float, and 1 or 2% in rock outcrop, and we just have to work to develop that. Beyond the uranium, the rare earths, what we're seeing there are relatively small deposits, but really quite high grade. And our thought is that we can pull together a solid resource of a few 100,000 pounds and develop it under a small mine license. Well, we could have something that's has an in situ value of $1,600 or something like that, but it's costing us $400 to process, to mine and process. So an exceptional cash flow opportunity under a lower permitting threshold and being able to move things forward fairly quickly. So it's a pretty neat opportunity. Beyond that, we've got some ISR projects in the US, 2 in Wyoming, Kaycee and Boot Hill. And then we've got one more ISR project in Arizona in the northern strip there. The core US project that's been getting investors excited, I guess, would be Kaycee. It is, I think, an exceptional ISR opportunity. We've pretty much pulled together an entire district scale play there. The last go around, Kaycee was divided up into little patches between 6 different companies. So not much went on there since the early 80s. Today, we've got over 26 miles of roll front trend under our control, and on the west side of the Powder River Basin, which is one of the primary ISR production areas in Wyoming and in the US. And within that, 110 miles of rural front mapped. So there's a lot of opportunity there. Our focus there is driven by a historic database that came through Encore, actually, of 3,700 historic drill holes that we're putting together into a model and looking at targeting particular higher grade or higher value areas for earlier exploration. It's probably one of the bigger exploration plays that you're going to see in the US in this cycle, this go around. Boot Heel is a little less developed further to the south, and then Moonshine, we've got some historic resources in ISR, fairly high grade material and really good quality target there too. Those are the main projects right now.
Mike, that's great. I'm looking forward to seeing the progress specifically at the lab project.
Pretty exciting.
That's an interesting couple insights you provided there. I appreciate that, and looking forward to seeing the company progress that hopefully this year on that front. And then also congrats to the team for you guys to be able to really get this Kaycee project consolidated under one umbrella, which I think is a great feat and speaks to Bill and your ability to be able to do that. Plus, of course, the team helping you guys out. Mike, touch just briefly on the capital structure of the company for us, for the audience who are new to this. A lot of our audience probably is new to this, hasn't really been talked about out there yet. Talk about shares outstanding for the company, the cash on hand, and if you will, the major shareholders.
Yeah, so what we're doing right now is we're doing a 50-cent raise for $6 million. By the time the smoke clears from that and we have completed a reverse takeover of a publicly listed company, we'd expect to be running around 48 million shares fully diluted and having about 7.5 million Canadian in the bank. The largest shareholder will be Encore, 19.9%. We've got some fairly significant funds out of New York, Toronto, and Brazil as well, who've taken significant positions. Management and insiders will be around 10% at that point, so we've got a good piece of the company as well, and we've put our money in too. So really well structured, people who are long-term in the uranium space and not looking for a quick flip on a double. That actually is one of the key things in our business is having a shareholder base that cares about the project as opposed to the promotion.
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to go over to Bill here because Mike said something that really ties this in. Bill, Encore is a major shareholder, and there is a good precedent, of course, as you know, and I know, moving the exploration assets out of a company when it progresses into development and production. I can think of a handful of examples, last cycle and this cycle. Is nuclear fuels the exploration arm, if you will, of Encore?
In essence, it is. It's a de facto exploration arm. These are, like I say, unparalleled assets that we put in there in terms of those that we aren't ready to pursue in terms of a production profile. They just don't have enough work done on them yet. In particular, the Kaycee with it's over 100 miles of roll front sitting on the western limb of one of the most highly productive basins in the U.S. in the Wyoming and the Powder River Basin. Really compelling target, especially with that much already identified through drilling, and really only one serious campaign of work, that having been done in the very late 70s, right at the beginning of the demise of the nuclear industry, if you will. So an excellent advanced exploration project. So it's just going to take some work. And of course, that's reflected by Encore's arrangement with Nuclear Fuels to back into 51% ownership of that project by paying a multiple of the expenditures in the ground, plus taking it, carrying Nuclear Fuels to production, which would benefit Encore by having a project, assuming a very large project, to drop into the production pipeline, as well as benefiting Nuclear Fuels in that most exploration companies have slim to no chance of ever being production oriented in revenue, and their only exit strategy is to find someone to buy them. So this is a really good mutual arrangement that provides Encore additional pounds for production, assuming it works out, and good reason to think that will be a good likelihood, as well as providing Nuclear Fuels an avenue to revenue and production itself.
A very good structure, and I commend you guys for being able to put this together. And the potential with the Labrador project and what we saw up there last cycle with respect to exploration work and what came out of that. I'll think of the Michelin project, for example. That's exciting. And then also the fact that this Kaycee project was just on nobody's radar, Bill and Mike, I just think is also very compelling in terms of just the sheer size of this land package. So well done on that front. Mike, let's move back over to you for a moment. Give us a little bit more detail on the initial work that is planned for the company this year, how you plan to spend the money on this first work program. What will be the focus and what do you expect to accomplish this year?
One of our key areas would be working on the rare earths up in Labrador and trying to tie some high grade showings that we have there together into more of a continuous belt on the shears that they exist on, looking for those pounds in the grounds, as well as more regional exploration there, looking for that high grade uranium discovery. Beyond that, we'll be kicking in at Kaycee and starting to develop our targeting there, and I expect doing some drilling there as well. It's should be pretty exciting. Boot Heel probably won't see a lot of work in southern Wyoming, but we expect that the Moonshine project in northern Arizona as well, we'd look to get a bit of drilling done there too.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited to see this progress here. Let's move into just as we wrap up here. I appreciate your guys taking the time today. Let's just cover briefly, Mike. I want to come back to you for a moment to give Bill a breather and talk just a bit about the management team that you guys have formulated up for this company. As Bill and I've discussed on multiple occasions, talent is a real problem. Getting the right people is a real problem in this sector, amongst others. But talk about the management team that will be behind the company and any specific people you'd like to mention.
Yeah, beyond Bill and myself, we've got a couple heavy hitters. David Miller is on board. He's a uranium executive from the last cycle with Strathmore, as well as he's worked with Orana, the French nuclear power group, and a number of other companies in Wyoming. Eugene Spearing, a key guy. He's had some great success in uranium discovery as well. Actually, did some work at Kaycee in the earlier years. We've got some young geologists on board as well, so not everyone's a gray hair. So we've got people who are excited to get out into the field and actually be hammering rocks and drilling holes, and that's as important, I think. So it's a pretty well-rounded team and unusual for an earlier stage uranium team in the depth of experience that we've got.
Thank you, Mike, for that. Bill, just can you speak just a little bit more about the go public plan, if you will, and maybe talk about the details surrounding a potential listing? I know you can't share much, but talk about the timing, maybe what exchange is targeted, if you can share that. Maybe give us a little more color.
Well, we do have several options in front of us. We look to announce something here in the next couple of weeks. Just been awfully busy on closing up private financing, as well as time-consuming aspects of Encore. But we should get that finalized here in the next day or two, and then hope to announce an RTO within the next, I'd say, couple of weeks. And we'll be with a Canadian firm. Obviously, that's Canadian markets are the best place to incubate these companies and really attract the initial investors into the space. So that's about all I can tell you. I can't get too specific, obviously, other than you won't have to wait long.
Bill, that's great. Appreciate the color around that. And as chairman, Bill, what is your overall vision for the company here? Speak to just kind of the long-term potential. What do you expect to really accomplish with this vehicle as the uranium cycle progresses?
Two factors to that. Obviously, the first and initial thrust is going to be in Labrador, where we've got really two commodities. We've got some exceptionally high grade uranium there, and then you've also, of course, got the rare earth play as well, right in the midst of an established rare earth project area, if you will. So that's going to be awfully exciting to see emerge. And then in terms of Encore's more specific interest is seeing, the time and effort, really the study, and then the actual work to go into the Kaycee project to develop it to the point where hopefully it is of sufficient size and grade to plop into Encore's timeline to our production schedule. So, Mike's got a good team. He's got some excellent geologists working under him, and it's going to be very interesting to see that develop down the path that we've discussed.
Bill, I appreciate that, sharing the vision here and giving us a flavor for that, how that's going to be. a lot of potential here, and with a little bit of capital, get quite a ways with respect to pounds. So we'll see how this goes. I appreciate that. Well, guys, let's leave it there for now. I want to go over to Mike. For potential investors who are listening in, the company has a market capitalization, of course, private, 24 million Canadian approximately. If and when this gets listed on a major Canadian exchange, Mike, why should investors consider nuclear fuels?
That's the big question, because I think we have by far some of the best exploration targets, relatively short windows to developing them with reasonable cost profiles on them. So we'd expect to be able to progress our project in Labrador fairly quickly. Our project in Wyoming is split estate, so it's a little bit easier to drill there in terms of what you can accomplish and how quickly you can go. So, building pounds in the ground, not quite as hard. Those are kind of the key things. How fast can you move your project ahead? Newfoundland, Labrador, great place to work, Wyoming as well. So,
thank you, Mike. And what's the best way for people to reach out to the company at this stage?
you can go to our website, which is nuclearfuels.energy.
Very well. Bill, any closing comments?
No, I think it's, an ideally well conceived company in terms of return for the shareholders, return for Encore's, initial setup of the company, and is a unique vehicle in that it does have some very advanced projects, a road to, at least a path to production, which for a small exploration company, as I mentioned before, is virtually non-existent. So it puts it in a very unique space. And as you keyed in on, with key technical people that'll be able to get it in an arena that's very short on technical talent.
Well said. Mike, Bill, appreciate you guys taking the time to introduce this new company. Looking forward to seeing the progress. Best of luck as you launch off the ground here this year and also on that upcoming work program. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrew, and really appreciate the opportunity to put it in front of your audience.
Thank you.